The Lockridge family's monthly dinners were less about the food and more about showing off their wealth. This night, in the vast estate just outside Napa Valley, promised to be especially grating. I settled into my usual spot near the fireplace, quietly watching as my cousins vied to outbrag each other. Just bought a ranch in Jackson Hole, Chase drawled, swirling his wine glass. Right next to the guy who owns half of Silicon Valley. Please, scoffed Felicity, flipping open her designer clutch with a flourish. We just closed on a vineyard in Tuscany. Private access to the Mediterranean. You can't even put a price on that kind of view. I hid a smile behind my iced tea. If only they knew, Mira. Aunt Victoria's voice cut sharply across the table. You've been awfully quiet. Chase leaned in, faux sympathy dripping. We were just wondering about your living situation. And there it was. What about it? I replied, setting down my glass. That cramped duplex in Portland, he said. Still renting, right? The one on Alder Street, Felicity added, feigning surprise. Didn't think people our age still rented. I almost laughed. The Alder Street complex was my company's first commercial acquisition, under Norwest Urban Partners. To them, I was just a struggling tenant. In truth, I was the owner. I like the space, I said evenly. You're 35, sweetie, Victoria said, her smile dripping with condescension. Time to grow up. Buy something real. Real? How about a $1.8 billion portfolio of multifamily buildings? Commercial towers, and yes, Lockridge Plaza, the very property they gathered in 6 months ago? I acquired it quietly through a private equity arm they'd never connect to me. I've managed just fine, I replied. Chase smirked. You can't even afford a mortgage. I leaned back and let them chatter. Soon the lease renewal would land on their desks. And guess whose name would be on the letterhead? Dad finally glanced up from his wine. Now, Chase, not everyone has your sharp instincts. Mira chose her path. Aunt Victoria sighed, as if disappointed that I hadn't married a hedge fund manager or become some lifestyle influencer. They thought I spent my days showing rundown apartments to broke grad students, scraping by on commission checks. What they didn't know was that Mira Hale, the family black sheep, was also Norwest Urban Partners, the quiet firm snapping up commercial and residential properties across the Pacific Northwest for the past decade. Speaking of real estate, Felicity interrupted, a sparkle in her eye. Have you heard about the Alder Street situation? Some company bought the entire block. They're planning to demolish it, she added with fake pity. Guess that little apartment of yours will finally be gone. I kept my face neutral. I was the buyer, and I had no intention of tearing anything down. The Alder Street complex was a hidden gem. Brick facades, vintage detailing, and rent protections for families who'd lived there for decades. I was deep into a respectful renovation. Really? I asked. Hadn't heard. Well, of course not, Chase smirked. Deals that size are way beyond your league. If you get kicked out, Victoria said brightly, you can always move back into the guest house. We'll help you find something more respectable. Maybe even someone respectable. I'm happy, I said flatly. And so is my landlord. Felicity gave a tight laugh. You can't live small forever, dear. Hale used to mean something in this state. It still did, just not in the way they thought. In real estate circles, Norwest was synonymous with ethical growth and tenant-first investing. The exact opposite of my cousins. Flashy developments that bulldozed communities for clout. Actually, Dad said, setting down his glass, this meeting's partly about business. The board's concerned about the new owner of Lockridge Plaza. I tilted my head. Norwest Urban Partners bought a majority stake 6 months ago, he added. No one really knew who they were. Possibly some foreign investors. Chase nodded knowingly. Has to be. These tycoons always love legacy properties. If only they realized that the mysterious investor they feared was sitting right here, dressed down in a thrifted cardigan and worn-out boots. And now, Dad continued, they're asking some hard questions, especially about our accounting methods. Creative accounting, like when Chase borrowed from the building fund to pay for his Jackson Hole vacation, or how Felicity disguised her designer handbags as client engagement expenses. I'm sure it's nothing major, Aunt Victoria said, her pearls slightly trembling with unease. The Hale name still carries weight. That's just it, Dad cut in sharply. This Norwest person doesn't seem impressed by names at all. They've demanded a full audit. I watched the flicker of panic ripple across their faces, tightly hidden behind forced polished smiles. An audit would reveal more than just suspicious expenses. It would tear their whole charade apart. Maybe Mira could help, Felicity said all of a sudden, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She works in real estate, right? Maybe she knows someone on the management team. They all turned toward me simultaneously. Just like that, I was no longer the family disappointment. I had suddenly become useful. I mostly handle smaller residential clients, I said smoothly. Nothing on the scale of Lockridge Plaza. For heaven's sake, Chase snapped. You can't even help your own family. Mom gave him a warning look, but her silence spoke volumes. Even Dad had returned to scrolling through his phone, uninterested in defending me. They had no idea how valuable I was about to become, just not in the way they expected. Tomorrow morning, Norwest Urban Partners would issue a public statement. Effective immediately, Lockridge Plaza would be undergoing a comprehensive operational overhaul. No more hidden budgets, no more contracts handed out based on nepotism, no more treating the building like it was a personal credit card. I glanced around the penthouse. Artwork bought with maintenance funds, couches priced 3 times their worth, fixtures installed by Felicity's husband's company, complete with inflated invoices. Anyway, I said, standing and dusting off my jeans. Some of us have early mornings, Felicity smirked, off to show more rent-controlled studios. I slung my battered leather bag over my shoulder. Inside it were board reports, legal filings, and renovation plans worth more than everything in this room combined. No, Mira, Aunt Victoria called sweetly. Next time, maybe dress more like a Hale. Appearances do matter. I smiled. Don't worry, I replied. Tomorrow, I'll look exactly like the Hales expect. They just didn't realize I'm already the one running the show. If you've been quietly rooting for Mira all along, don't miss what happens when the boardroom doors swing open. Subscribe to the channel to be the first to see how the family reacts when they discover that the nobody they dismissed now holds all the keys. The next morning, I stood in my real office, an entire penthouse floor overlooking downtown Portland, preparing for the moment I'd been planning for over a year. My assistant Illa walked in briskly, placing a cappuccino beside my laptop. The Lockridge Plaza board is already seated, she said. Your family showed up early, trying to charm the independent members. I smirked, imagining Chase and Felicity desperately working the room. Audit packets are printed and distributed. The forensic team found even more than expected. She paused. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once they find out, there's no turning back. They need to learn, I said quietly, that legacy isn't a license to abuse power. I turned toward the glass, catching my reflection. Gone were the jeans and cardigan. Today, I wore a deep navy Altusara suit. Sharp lines, quiet strength. The kind of outfit Aunt Victoria always dreamed I'd wear to meet a husband. Instead, I was wearing it to bring down their house of cards. The ownership announcement goes live in 20 minutes, Illa added. Once it's out, you'll be unmasked. Then let's begin, I said, picking up my briefcase. The Lockridge Plaza boardroom fell silent as I entered. My family was clustered at the far end, looking uneasy, underdressed, and visibly shaken. Who are you? Chase barked. This is a private meeting. I calmly set my briefcase at the head of the table. I'm Mira Hale, I said, founder and sole owner of Norwest Urban Partners, the company that owns this building, and several others your family leveraged illegally. Aunt Victoria turned ghostly pale. Felicity's lips parted, but no sound came out. My father's hands clenched tightly around his pen. Mira, he breathed. I nodded. Good morning. I opened the briefcase and began sliding audit reports across the table. Shall we review your financials? This is insane, Chase stammered. You're just what? I looked him straight in the eye. The black sheep, the renter, the woman in thrifted clothes. Cassandra blinked in disbelief. But you show apartments. I work, I said simply. And I built something real. Something with integrity, not illusion. The board sat stunned, watching the proud Hale family unravel, one page at a time. These folders, I said, contain detailed records of every misused fund, inflated invoice, and forged receipt. Reports exposing financial irregularities tied to Lockridge Plaza's accounts. I began handing out the final batch of documents. Chase, would you care to explain the $2 million missing from roof repairs? Money that instead funded your Jackson Hole getaway? His face flushed so hard and fast I thought he might faint. Or you, Cassandra, I continued, flipping to the next page. Would you like to walk us through your husband's invoices, charging 3 times the market rate for basic plumbing? You'd air out your own family's dirty laundry like this? Aunt Victoria gasped. No, I said evenly. You aired it out. I'm just making sure it gets cleaned. Dad finally spoke, his voice low and pleading. Mira, sweetheart, we can explain. Don't, I interrupted, raising a hand. I've watched this family treat our great-grandfather's legacy like a personal ATM. While you mocked my so-called humble life, I was building something better, something based on values, not vanity. But why? Cassandra asked, dazed. Why pretend to struggle? I didn't pretend anything, I replied. I lived modestly. I invested wisely. You assumed wealth had to be loud. The Alder Street building, Chase said, stunned. You really live there? I own it, I corrected him. And most of the block. And no, I'm not tearing it down because some of us care about people, not just profits. Suddenly, phones buzzed around the table. One board member looked up, reading from his screen. Norwest Urban Partners reveals CEO's identity. Mira Hale, the obscure family member, confirmed as owner of a $2 billion real estate portfolio. He fumbled his phone. Ranked among top ethical developers, he muttered. Historic preservation, tenant protections. This will ruin us, Cassandra whispered, pale as a ghost. No, I said firmly, this will save you from yourselves. Effective today, Lockridge Plaza will operate transparently. No more shell games, no more sweetheart contracts. Chase tried to sound defiant, but his voice trembled. Then he smiled bitterly. I'll pass these reports to the authorities. I'm sure the IRS will find them. Enlightening. A heavy silence settled over the room. What do you want? Dad finally asked. I want you to remember what the Hale name meant before all this. I met their eyes one by one. Great-grandfather built communities, not just profit margins. I gathered my papers. You have a choice. Work with me to restore that legacy, I said evenly, or find somewhere else to live. I hear there are some nice rentals in Lake Ashgrove. I turned to leave. Mira, wait. Dad's voice stopped me just as I reached the door. I was wrong about you. Yes, I replied quietly. You were? The aftermath unfolded like a scene from a business drama. The media couldn't get enough of the quiet Portland native who'd built a real estate empire in secret and dismantled her family's illusions in one board meeting. Aunt Victoria resigned from 3 local boards, too ashamed to show her face. Cassandra's husband's firm folded weeks after the audit was released. But not all was bitter. He was arrested. Finally facing real consequences, he enrolled in a public university's real estate program and started volunteering at a transitional housing shelter downtown. She told me later it gave her more purpose than any gallery opening ever had. And Dad? He asked to learn the business, not as a father reclaiming control, but as a student. This time, he wanted to understand what I'd built. 6 months later, I sat in my Alder Street apartment, yes, I kept it, reviewing new quarterly reports. Lockridge Plaza was thriving, leases were stable, tenant satisfaction was up. Small retailers on the ground floor were turning healthy profits. A knock at the door broke my focus. I opened it to find Mom. She wore jeans, no makeup. It took me a moment to process the casualness. I got your invitation, she said, holding it up. A courtyard holiday party. I nodded. It's not quite your scene. No, she admitted, glancing around my modest space. But I'm learning maybe scene isn't everything. She picked up a photo of me at 23, beaming at my real estate license ceremony. I never asked, she said softly. Why this path? Because I wanted to build something real, I replied, not just buy and flaunt. And now, she murmured, you control more than all of us. I do, I nodded, but control isn't the goal. Purpose is. She looked at me seriously. Will you teach me? Come tonight, I said. Meet the families who've lived here for decades. Listen, that's where legacy begins. Later, I stood by my window, watching lights twinkle across Portland, the city I'd quietly made mine. Lockridge Plaza glowed in the distance, no longer a monument to greed, but a symbol of restoration. Below, the Alder Street building buzzed with quiet life. Brickwork, original wood beams, garden courtyards, all preserved with care. My phone pinged with messages, partnership offers, speaking invitations, acquisition deals. Norwest Urban Partners was in high demand. But I kept my schedule humane, my routine grounded. Success wasn't about outshining my past. It was about building something that mattered, something that would last. Sometimes the person they pity becomes the one they must learn from. And sometimes the greatest triumph doesn't roar, it endures. A week later, at the Alder Street holiday party, I stood by the garden fountain, watching my family adjust to a world they once dismissed. Mom sat beside Mrs. Lopez, a tenant for 38 years, listening with genuine interest. Chase helped string lights with Mr. Keller, a WWE veteran and longest-term resident. Cassandra laughed beside a table of kids icing sugar cookies. Slowly, they were learning. Real wealth isn't in what you flaunt. It's in what you preserve, what you share, what you elevate. Dad joined me near the cocoa table. You know, he said, your great-grandfather believed buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets. I nodded. I found his old ledgers, handwritten notes about protecting tenants. We forgot that. He looked at me, not like a daughter who'd gone astray, but like someone who'd carried the torch he'd dropped. You could have ruined us. Never the point, I said, watching a little girl twirl under the fairy lights. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. Sometimes the greatest success isn't proving them wrong. It's offering them a better version of right. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly counted out, maybe you see a little of yourself in me. I didn't set out to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted to build something real, something rooted in values, not vanity. If my story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? What have you built in silence while others doubted you? Let's talk about it. Let's give credit for the quiet work, the long nights, the tough choices. And if you're facing a moment like I once did, when the world expects nothing from you, don't shout louder. Just build stronger. You don't need approval to begin. You need purpose and consistency. The rest will come. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. More stories lie ahead about resilience, redemption, and redefining success on your own terms. Because legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you create. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be. So subscribe, stay with me, and let's build something that lasts.